Night descends upon Tamriel like a velvet tide, and the lands of mare and man exhale the last warmth of day. Lanterns gutter in alleyways where the scent of damp stone lingers, and the hush of evening folds across forests and fjords alike. In that hush, the world seems to hold its breath, as if aware that unseen eyes have opened. The moon's masser and secunda drift through the sky, their pale light bathing cobblestones and meadow alike in a silver that feels older than memory. Merchants draw their shutters closed. Travelers quicken their pace, guided by the quiet instinct that night belongs not to the bustling or the weary, but to those who thrive in silence. And beyond that silence, faint as the brush of a moth's wing, there are whispers. They're not the voices of wind through pine or river over rock. They are words, low and deliberate, curling beneath the clamor of mortal thought. Long ago they began, so long that no chronicle can say with certainty when the first syllable slithered from shadow. Some claim it was in Morrowind, where ash storms hide secrets, and the Morag Tong once honored Mephila with silent blades. Others insist the first dark vow was sworn in Cyrodiil's heart, beneath the stones of an empire yet unbuilt. But none who speak of it do so loudly, for the name of the coming order is a shiver on the tongue. Legends speak of a brotherhood unborn, of assassins who move through history like a dream moves through the sleeper, inevitable, half-remembered, yet impossible to grasp. These are not mere cutthroats seeking coin. Their killings are not chaos but ceremony, a grim devotion as meticulous as any priest's liturgy. In the dark hours before midnight, when hearth fires sink to embers, the first seeds of their covenant take root. Listen closely, and you might hear how it begins. A widow in Cheydinhole kneels beside a guttering candle, her grief a quiet tempest. A Dunmare exile, lost amid the choking ash of Red Mountain, clutches a blade and whispers a name with tear-stained lips. A farmer in the Gold Coast dreams of vengeance for a family wronged. Different tongues, different sorrows, but each plea slides into the same vast silence, and the silence answers. It answers not with thunder, but with a stillness that is deeper than sound. A promise forms there, dark and glimmering, like the faint reflection of stars on an underground lake. No priest consecrates it. No emperor decrees it. It is the promise of retribution, of balance wrought through the edge of a dagger drawn in quiet devotion. So the night deepens. Wolves bay in distant hills. A lone lute falls silent in a tavern corner. The moons climb higher, patient witnesses to the birth of rumor. Somewhere, unseen, a figure steps from shadow to shadow, their footfalls softer than falling ash. No one knows the figure's name. Perhaps no one ever will. But the world tilts slightly toward destiny, and the first faint thread of the Dark Brotherhood is spun. And still the whispers gather strength. They drift along the coasts of Somerset, seep through the labyrinthine caves of Skyrim, and coil around the marble towers of the Imperial City. They promise nothing but a question. Who among you will listen? The question lingers as the hour nears midnight, and Tamriel, vast and dreaming, waits. The hour after midnight carries a peculiar gravity. It is the moment when even the most vigilant watchmen grow drowsy, when the crackle of a dying hearth becomes the loudest sound in a lonely room. Tamriel sleeps, yet within the deep hollows of its history, something stirs, something older than the Empire and more patient than the turning of moons. Long before the name Dark Brotherhood was ever breathed, another order held the art of quiet death in sacred trust, the Morag Tong. Born of ancient Dunmary devotion to the Daedric prince Mephila, they were assassins not of greed, but of ritual. Their blades were offerings, their killings, scripture written in mortal blood. In Morrowind's ashen streets, their presence was not hidden but honored, for they served what the tribunal called the web spinner's purpose, a weaving of secrets, politics, and fate. Yet even the most sanctioned darkness can fracture. Among the Morag Tongs, faithful arose whispers of a vision far more intimate than Mephila's tangled webs. A vision of a matron unseen, a night mother who called to certain hearts in the language of dreams. Some said she was Mephala in another mask. Others swore she was a mortal woman who crossed the boundary between life and the endless dusk beyond. Her origin was a riddle, but her summons was unmistakable, a whisper that promised both power and belonging. From that summons came the Black Sacrament. Picture it, a solitary room lit only by a single guttering candle. On the floor, a crude effigy of a victim-to-be fashioned from human bone and nightshade petals. The supplicant kneels, chanting words too ancient for common speech, the syllables falling like drops of ink into water. Each word is a plea and a command, a message sent across the thin veil of death. Those who performed the rite claimed they felt the air itself shift, as though an unseen listener leaned closer, eager to receive the offering. Not all who heard the Night Mother answered, but those who did became the seeds of a new order. They were fugitives from the Morag Tong, wanderers of the wider provinces, dreamers who found in her whispers a sanctuary deeper than any temple's crypt. They formed small cells first, unremarkable gatherings in forgotten basements and abandoned caves. But a pattern emerged, a hand of 5, each finger sworn to secrecy, each life bound to a silent covenant. Thus the Black Hand took form, not through proclamation, but through inevitability, as if destiny itself desired a darker reflection of the world's justice. The earliest records, if they can be called that, speak of these assassins as phantoms. A merchant in the Heartlands found lifeless in a locked room, a duke in High Rock poisoned by an unseen touch, a caravan lord in Hammerfell slain without a sound. No witness ever spoke of their faces, only of the cold, deliberate artistry of death. Fear spread quietly, as mist spreads over a marsh. And with fear came the first true acknowledgement. An organization was rising whose allegiance was not to kings, guilds, or gods, but to the Night Mother alone. Some scholars, writing centuries later, would attempt to cage this emergence in dates and chronicles. But the truth is more fluid. The Brotherhood did not arrive with a single birth cry. It seeped into existence like water, finding the lowest stone, patient and unstoppable. It lived in stories told around dying fires, in the tightening of locks before bedtime, in the way parents hushed children who asked too many questions about the dark. And so the world shifted. The Morag Tong remained, bound to Morrowind's laws and rituals, but the Night Mother's children spread beyond borders. Cyrodiil's bustling markets, Skyrim's snow-heavy peaks, the glittering coasts of Somerset, all felt the feather-light touch of their growing presence. They were both rumor and reality, a melody half-heard yet impossible to forget. As dawn approached, pale and tentative, the whispers receded but did not fade. They lingered in dreams and in the uneasy stillness before morning birds began their songs. The first chapter of a bloodstained history had begun, though few yet recognized it. What had started as an echo in midnight's hush was becoming a heartbeat, a pulse that would, in centuries to come, guide the Dark Brotherhood toward its own terrible glory. Before the First Empire carved its banners across Tamriel, before the Tribunal masked themselves in godhood, there was only the quiet between stars. From that quiet came the whisper of a presence both maternal and terrifying, a figure whose name would one day be spoken with reverence and dread, the Night Mother. Her beginnings are a riddle wrapped in moonlight. Some tales claim she was once a mortal woman, a Dunmare of humble birth who dared to walk the line between life and the void beyond. Others murmur she was Mephala herself, the webspinner weaving a subtler tapestry under a softer name. There are even wandering mystics who insist she is older than the Edra and Daedra alike, an echo from the primal dark that existed before creation learned to shine. The truth is hidden like a pearl within endless seas, and perhaps that mystery is the heart of her power. Picture a lone cottage beneath a sky of hammered silver. Inside, a mother rocks a cradle that holds no child, for her children, 5 in number, have met a fate too cruel for dawn to witness. Grief settles over her like an endless night. Legends say she sang them a final lullaby, a song so gentle that the winds themselves paused to listen. In that moment of unbearable stillness, she crossed a boundary unseen. Whether by choice or by the inevitability of sorrow, her spirit slipped free, and the void welcomed her with a silence deeper than death. From that silence came a new voice, a harmony of shadow and lullaby. The first listeners spoke of dreams where a woman clothed in midnight knelt beside their beds. Her touch was cold, but not cruel, her words softer than a candle's sigh. She did not promise vengeance alone. She offered belonging, a family bound not by blood, but by the shared rhythm of secret purpose. Sweet children of the void, she is said to have whispered, come to me, and we shall be as one. The earliest adherents describe her presence as both soothing and absolute. They awoke with the certainty that she had heard their unspoken pleas. Where priests of the divines demanded sacrifice of coin or creed, the Night Mother asked only for devotion, for the quiet understanding that life and death are threads of the same cloth. In her shadow, revenge was not mere reprisal. It was a sacred balance, a hymn to the inevitability of ending. Word spread like a hush carried by winter wind. Travelers crossing the ashlands of Vardenfell felt a sudden calm, as if invisible eyes watched with infinite patience. Fishermen on the Niben swore they heard a lullaby woven into the lapping of moonlit water. Even the cold peaks of Skyrim could not keep the whisper from seeping through stone and snow. Everywhere, those who had lost something, family, honor, hope, felt a pull toward the unseen matron. And so the idea of the Night Mother was born, not merely as a legend, but as a presence that could be invoked, entreated, embraced. She became the hidden heartbeat of a growing faith, one that required no temple and feared no heresy. For those who called to her, the world's cruel symmetry suddenly made sense. Every wrong could meet its counterstroke, every sorrow find its silent echo. Now, when the moon's climb high and the air holds its breath, some say you can still feel that first breath of hers. A breeze without wind, a warmth without flame, brushing the soul like a memory half remembered. It is not a call to violence, but to the eternal night where beginning and ending are one. And in that breath, the Dark Brotherhood found its truest mother. When the Night Mother's presence seeped into mortal dreams, it did not thunder like a storm. It arrived as a hush, patient, deliberate, unyielding. Those who heard her first whispers awoke with a single, undeniable certainty. She had chosen them. And with that choice came a covenant that would shape centuries of shadow. The earliest disciples were wanderers, fugitives, and quiet souls who carried grief like a hidden blade. They met in abandoned shrines or in the root-bound caverns where moonlight could not intrude. They spoke little, for words seemed clumsy beside the music of her silence. Instead, they performed small rites of acknowledgement. A candle lit with trembling fingers, a dagger placed tip down in soil, a vow whispered as softly as a heartbeat. In these gatherings, the Night Mother's teachings crystallized into what later generations would call the Five Tenets, a code that was less commandment than rhythm, each principle a note in her endless lullaby. The first was silence, not merely the absence of sound, but the discipline of stillness, body, mind, and intention folded into the quiet she adored. The second was loyalty, a promise that the family of the Brotherhood outweighed all mortal ties of blood or kin. The third was secrecy, for her children must move as shadows move, unseen even by one another when necessity required. The fourth was obedience, a surrender of ego so that every blade would strike as if guided by her unseen hand. And the fifth, whispered last, was reverence, the acceptance that every life taken was not theft but tribute, an offering to the cosmic balance she embodied. These tenets were never etched on stone or parchment. They were carried in memory, recited like a prayer before sleep, passed from mentor to initiate as gently as a mother passes a lullaby to a drowsy child. To break them was to sever the thread of belonging. And in those early days, No punishment was more feared than exile from her dark embrace. Legends tell of the first listener, a Dunmary mystic who wandered the ash plains until a dream led her to a cave lit by phosphorescent fungi. There, the Night Mother is said to have spoken aloud, her voice a cascade of soft echoes that filled the cavern without disturbing the air. She entrusted the listener with a sacred duty, to receive her guidance and carry her will to the faithful. From this bond, the Black Hand would later emerge. 5 figures mirroring the fingers of fate, each sworn to protect the listener and preserve the purity of her voice. As the faith spread beyond Morrowind, its followers adapted to new provinces and tongues. In Cyrodiil, merchant sons donned black cowl and dagger. In High Rock, noble daughters slipped from feast to kneel in candlelit crypts. Everywhere the Night Mother's breath moved, the same pattern unfolded. The sacrament performed, a name given, a life quietly erased. Kings and beggars alike whispered of an invisible family that answered only to the darkness between stars. Yet there was no chaos in their work. Each death was measured, intimate, almost tender. Victims were not trophies, but notes in an unseen composition, each strike of steel part of a greater harmony. Those who witnessed the aftermath often spoke, in shuddering awe, of a serenity that clung to the scene, as though the Night Mother herself had kissed the world at the instant of the final breath. Centuries later, scholars would debate whether she was spirit, Daedra, or myth. But to the faithful, the question was hollow. For them, the Night Mother was the hush before dawn, the sigh that follows the last heartbeat, the endless cradle of the void. To hear her was to understand that life and death were never enemies, but reflections of the same moonlit sea. And so her legend deepened. The 5 tenets became the foundation upon which 1,000 hidden sanctuaries would rise. The listener's vigil continued, generation after generation, a chain of quiet devotion unbroken by time or empire. Through them, the Night Mother's first breath never ceased. It moved still, a soft exhale in the dark, guiding every blade that slips through the folds of mortal history. The centuries turned like silent wheels, and the Night Mother's secret family grew from rumor into a living thread within Tamriel's tapestry. But every thread must choose its own weave, and the time came when her children could no longer remain hidden beneath the name of the Morag Tong. From the ash-choked coasts of Morrowind to the bustling markets of Cyrodiil, the old order trembled. Sensing a quiet exodus, it could not stop. The Morag Tong had always served Mephala, the Daedric spider whose web bound politics and passion alike. Their killings were sanctioned by law and ritual, their writs signed in the open. Yet among them moved a restless undercurrent. Assassins who had tasted the Night Mother's whisper and found it sweeter, deeper, more intimate than any temple decree. For these faithful, Mephala's grand intrigues were distant and cold, while the Night Mother's call was personal, a lullaby meant for the soul alone. First came the hidden pilgrimages. Blades for hire would vanish from their writ-bound duties, traveling by moonlight to caves where the scent of nightshade thickened the air. There they performed the Black Sacrament in secret, offering names to the void and feeling the soft, unseen hand that marked them as chosen. Their departures were quiet, their returns even quieter. But suspicion grew. The Morag Tong prided itself on discipline. A silence that answered no question became its own confession. Inevitable fractures widened. Leaders who dared confront the defectors found themselves met not with defiance, but with an unnerving serenity. Some vanished entirely, their final moments lost to history. Others awoke to find the sign of a black hand scrawled in ash across their chamber walls. A message at once gentle and absolute. It was not hatred that pulled these assassins away. It was belonging, the sure knowledge that they had heard a truer hymn. And so the first oath was spoken, not in the echo of a temple hall, but beneath the open night, where stars pricked the sky like watchful eyes. 5 figures knelt around a circle of pale candles, each flame wavering in the soft coastal breeze. One by one, they whispered words that bound them not to any lord or Daedra, but to the Night Mother alone. Their vow was simple yet inexhaustible: to listen, to obey, to kill when called, and to guard the family with life and soul. Legends claim that as the final syllable fell, the air itself shifted. The candles guttered without wind, and a hush rolled outward like the tide, carrying the scent of cold stone and damp earth. Whether dream or miracle, each assassin felt the same presence, a maternal darkness enfolding them in quiet approval. From that moment, they were no longer merely blades of the Morag Tong. They were something uncharted, a new shadow in the endless night. News of the oath spread only in murmurs, yet its effect rippled across Tamriel. Contracts once delivered by imperial magistrates began to vanish from official records. Nobles who relied on the Tong's sanctioned killings found their petitions unanswered, their gold returned without explanation. Instead, whisper directions to other contacts, cloaked figures who asked for nothing but a name and a token of intent, passed from mouth to trembling mouth. The Dark Brotherhood was not yet named, but its heartbeat had begun. The Morag Tong, proud and ancient, watched as its own disciples disappeared into shadow. Some called it betrayal. Others feared it was destiny, a weaving even Mephala could not unmake. In the still hours before dawn, the Ashlands themselves seemed to listen as the first true Black Hand was formed, a silent covenant of 5 fingers, each one a promise that the Night Mother's family would endure. Above them the moons drifted, pale witnesses to a transformation no empire could chart. And in the hush that followed, the Night Mother's whisper lingered like the faintest breath against the ear. "My children, the void is ours." The oath once spoken could not be unspoken. It spread like a ripple through still water, quiet yet unstoppable, drawing others who had tasted the Night Mother's call. Soon, in hidden chambers beneath city stones, the first black sacraments were performed not as isolated acts of grief, but as deliberate rituals of a growing family. Picture a lone petitioner in a candle-lit cellar, kneeling before an effigy of crude bones and nightshade petals. The air smells of wax and iron. The words fall in a cadence older than memory, each syllable a soft key turning in a lock no mortal eye can see. When the final phrase is spoken, "Sweet Mother, send your child unto me," the darkness itself seems to lean forward, listening. Moments later, a name, carried like smoke across the void, reaches ears that are everywhere and nowhere. This was not murder for coin alone. It was communion. The newly sworn assassins treated each contract as a sacred trust. A single death might take days of patient study. The rhythm of a target's breath, the creak of a stair under moonlight, the angle of a silent blade. They moved like thoughts between dreams, unseen and almost imagined, yet each strike landed with the weight of destiny. Those who hired them rarely glimpsed their faces. A quiet knock at a midnight door, a soft exchange of a token or a folded note, and then silence until the task was done. From these beginnings rose the structure that would define the Dark Brotherhood for ages. The Black Hand, 5 in number, mirrored the fingers of fate itself. For speakers served as voices of command, while the listener alone communed with the Night Mother, hearing the sacred whispers that named the next life to be taken. This hierarchy was more than organization. It was liturgy. Every decision, every movement was a prayer of obedience to the unseen matron. Their sanctuaries became places of paradoxical warmth. Within stone walls hidden behind waterfalls or deep beneath bustling cities, the Brotherhood called each other family. By candlelight, they shared stories, trained in the art of silence, and recited the 5 tenets like bedtime verses. New initiates were welcomed not with the harshness of soldiers' drill, but with the quiet affection of siblings reunited after long absence. To outsiders, they were ghosts. To one another, they were home. The wider world, however, felt a chill. Merchants whispered of nobles found lifeless in locked chambers. Priests preached of a faceless evil that no divine could banish. Yet no army could march against an enemy without borders, and no bounty could tempt hunters to chase shadows that seemed to breathe through the walls themselves. The Dark Brotherhood was becoming more than rumor. It was inevitability. In Cyrodiil, an ambitious count hired them to end a rival's line. Within a fortnight, the rival perished in what appeared to be peaceful sleep. In distant Hammerfell, a pirate king awoke to find the mark of the Black Hand drawn in soot upon his sail, and by morning he lay dead upon the tide. Every province carried its own tale, each more whispered than the last, and every telling strengthened the myth that a single plea to the Night Mother could move the hidden family to action, no matter the distance, no matter the power of the prey. Scholars would later debate whether the Night Mother truly spoke, or whether clever leaders merely claimed her voice to inspire devotion. But to the Brotherhood, the question was irrelevant. They heard her, in the breath of wind through a narrow alley, in the hush between heartbeats before a blade strikes, in the profound stillness after life departs. Her presence was a comfort deeper than any mortal love, a certainty that death itself could be a form of grace. Thus the Morag Tong's shadow faded, replaced by a darkness that belonged to no province and feared no law. The Black Hand's fingers stretched across Tamriel, unseen yet undeniable, binding its members to an oath that echoed beyond time. To listen, to obey, to kill when called, and to remain forever the children of the Night Mother. And so the Brotherhood's bloodstained rise quickened, silent as snowfall, yet inevitable as dawn's return. Each contract fulfilled, each whisper obeyed, wove another strand into the endless tapestry of night. From ash they had come, and to oath they were bound, a family of the void whose story had only just begun. The fledgling family that had stepped from ash into oath now sought places where its quiet heart could beat unseen. A blade needs a sheath, a whisper needs an echo, and the Dark Brotherhood required sanctuaries, havens where silence itself could dwell. So they wandered Tamriel's hidden bones, searching for chambers that belonged to darkness alone. They found them beneath moss-thick forests where roots knotted like the fingers of old gods. They found them in the hollow ribs of forgotten ruins, where moonlight filtered through shattered stone in pale columns. Some were mere cellars under merchant houses. Others stretched through caverns whose depths hummed with subterranean rivers. Each location was chosen not merely for secrecy, but for a feeling, a hush in the air, a stillness that seemed to welcome their arrival, as if the Night Mother herself had prepared the space. Entering a sanctuary was like stepping outside of time. The world of bustling trade and clanging forges fell away the moment one passed through the concealed door. Cool air, rich with the scent of candle wax and damp stone, wrapped itself around every visitor like a velvet cloak. Low corridors bent in deliberate curves so that no direct line of sight existed, each turn a soft reminder that nothing in this life is ever straight. Water dripped in distant chambers, a slow metronome for meditations of patience. Here the family gathered, not as soldiers, but as siblings. By lantern glow, they shared silent meals, their laughter muffled but genuine. Weapons were oiled with the same reverence a priest might give to sacred relics. For each dagger was an extension of the Night Mother's will. Training unfolded like a dance, soft steps on stone, breath held until the world itself seemed to pause. Young initiates learned to move as shadows move, to wait as mountains wait. They learned that a single heartbeat could stretch into eternity if one listened closely enough. Within these sanctuaries, the hierarchy of the Black Hand took living form. For speakers, masked and deliberate, carried the Night Mother's instructions outward, while the listener, calm as moonlit water, remained the still point around which all decisions revolved. When the listener emerged from silent meditation with a new name to be taken, a shiver of purpose passed through every corridor. No horn was blown, no drumbeat sounded. Only a shared glance, a subtle nod, and the quiet machinery of death began to move. Yet these hidden halls were not grim alone. They were homes. Tapestries woven with midnight hues softened the walls. Tiny gardens of night-blooming flowers filled corners with faint fragrance. Children of the Void celebrated birthdays in whispers, exchanged gifts of finely honed tools, and spoke of their lives before the family with gentle nostalgia. For all their work and death, they cherished life within these walls, understanding that the two were never enemies but eternal companions. Outside, the provinces bustled unaware. Markets opened with clattering gates, kings held court, and scholars scribbled treatises on law and magic. But beneath the feet of farmers and emperors alike, the Brotherhood's sanctuaries breathed in secret. Their entrances were hidden behind waterfalls, inside hollow tree trunks, beneath unremarkable trapdoors that a passerby might never notice. Even if found, many were protected by wards of illusion and labyrinthine tunnels that turned intruders into wandering echoes. These shelters were more than hideouts. They were the living embodiment of the creed. To cross their thresholds was to step into a world where silence was not absence, but presence, where every candle flame mirrored the steady pulse of the void. And though their work reached every corner of Tamriel, it was within these chambers that the Brotherhood felt most alive, most united, most eternal. Thus the Guild of Shadows grew not by proclamation, but by quiet heartbeat. Sanctuary by sanctuary, oath by oath, they threaded themselves into the unseen veins of the world, a family whose home was darkness and whose promise was as endless as night. The sanctuaries were more than shelters of stone and candlelight. They were living vessels for the Brotherhood's quiet faith. Within those echoing chambers, new bonds were forged and the art of death became a gentle, deliberate craft passed from elder to initiate like a family recipe whispered over a glowing hearth. Recruitment was never shouted from rooftops. No banners beckoned. No guild hall door stood open. Instead, the path began with a single act of devotion, the Black Sacrament. A hopeful supplicant, often trembling with grief or longing for vengeance, would gather the sacred ingredients, nightshade, human heart, a candle of black wax, and shape a crude effigy of the intended victim. Kneeling, they would chant the ancient plea until their voice fell into the rhythm of the void itself. If the Night Mother willed it, a listener might hear the call in a dream, or a speaker might feel a subtle tug in the stillness of meditation. Only then would the family send a quiet emissary to test the heart of the petitioner. The testing was as much spiritual as practical. A recruit's skill with blade or poison mattered far less than the depth of their silence. Could they move with patience? Could they embrace the stillness that the Night Mother cherished? Could they see death not as cruelty, but as balance? The answers revealed themselves in long hours of shadowed observation. Many hopefuls never knew they had been examined. Some lived entire lives never realizing that a hidden family had once considered them for adoption. Those who proved worthy were led through winding corridors to the heart of a sanctuary. There, under the gentle gaze of the listener, they swore the oath of the void, to honor the Night Mother, to obey the Black Hand, and to guard the family even beyond death. The ceremony was quiet yet profoundly intimate. Candles formed a circle around the initiate as each member of the Black Hand placed a gloved finger to their lips, sealing the vow with a gesture older than language. Training followed, a slow dance of shadow and stillness. Novices learned to blend with moonlight, to make each breath as silent as falling snow. They studied herbs that could lull a guard into dreamless sleep, the delicate balance of toxins that could silence without pain. But more than skill, they learned perspective, that every life taken was an offering, not an act of rage. The Brotherhood taught that a contract fulfilled with care honored both victim and void, binding the killer closer to the Night Mother's eternal cradle. Despite the grim profession, the sanctuaries nurtured an unexpected warmth. Meals were shared at long wooden tables, laughter echoing softly against stone walls. Elder assassins told stories of past contracts, not to boast, but to remind the young that precision and compassion walk hand in hand. Birthdays were observed with quiet gifts, a well-balanced dagger, a vial of rare poison, a simple poem written in elegant hand. Within those walls, death was their work, but life was their cherished companion. Outsiders could scarcely imagine such closeness. To most of Tamriel, the Dark Brotherhood was a specter, a nightmare whispered to restless children. Yet inside each sanctuary the family thrived, bound by affection as strong as any bloodline. They believed the night Mother smiled upon their joy as much as upon their discipline. For in every shared moment of tenderness lay the proof that death does not diminish love. Thus, in silence and devotion, the Guild of Shadows deepened its roots. Every new initiate strengthened the hidden web stretching across provinces and centuries. Every oath renewed the covenant first spoken under starry sky and candle flame. Within their sanctuaries the Brotherhood found not only a place to hide, but a home where the eternal night felt gentle, and where the promise of the void became as comforting as a mother's lullaby. The Dark Brotherhood's sanctuaries pulsed like quiet hearts beneath the soil, and from those hearts the family began to reach outward. What began as a whisper in forgotten caverns now stretched its fingers toward thrones and councils, toward the restless ambitions of kings and merchants alike. The world above, blind to the slow weaving below, was about to feel the first true sweep of the Brotherhood's crimson tide. It started subtly, as many tides do. A disgraced noble in High Rock sought vengeance for an insult whispered in a royal court. A warlord in Hammerfell desired an unchallenged path to a contested port. Each performed the Black Sacrament with trembling resolve, and each found, within a moon's turn, their enemies stilled by unseen hands. Word of these quiet miracles traveled faster than any courier. Merchants spoke of them in low voices across candlelit taverns. Diplomats carried rumors in sealed letters marked only with a black smear of ink. The Brotherhood did not chase wealth for its own sake, yet gold flowed like a second shadow. Contracts brought riches enough to stock sanctuaries with silks and rare poisons, to bribe city watchmen and ferry captains who asked no questions. But the true reward was influence. A single contract could shift a border, unseat a monarch, or end a feud that might have bled for generations. To those who listened closely, it became clear that the Night Mother's family was no mere guild of killers. They were an invisible parliament of death, deciding with each quiet strike which paths Tamriel's history would follow. The Black Hand moved with deliberate care. Speakers traveled by hidden roads to negotiate terms with clients of high station. A count whose rival had grown too bold, a counselor who needed an inconvenient witness removed. No ink ever sealed these agreements. Only a shared glance in a moonlit alley, a whispered name, and the exchange of a simple token, a black feather, a ring of onyx, marked the pact. Once accepted, the outcome was certain. No fortress wall or arcane ward could shield the chosen target from the family's patience. With each success, the legend deepened. In Cyrodiil, children recited rhymes warning that to speak ill of the Night Mother was to invite a dagger in sleep. In Elsewhere, caravans paused at dusk to leave small bowls of moon sugar as silent offerings of respect. Even the proudest Jarls of Skyrim began to weigh their words more carefully, for a whisper of the Brotherhood's presence was enough to still the bravest boast. Yet the family never rushed. Each contract was measured, almost ceremonial. Assassins spent weeks learning a target's habits, the subtle creak of a stare, the rhythm of breath beneath a lover's roof. Some kills required no blood at all. A perfectly timed poison slipped into a goblet, a quiet nudge of fate that left a victim to appear as though death had come of natural cause. To the Brotherhood, these were not murders, but offerings, tributes that honored the endless balance between life and the void. Sanctuaries flourished. New halls were carved beneath cities from Daggerfall to Bravel, each one a hidden vein feeding the growing body of the Order. Families who had once feared discovery now felt the pulse of inevitability. They were no longer merely survivors in shadow, but architects of destiny. The Night Mother's whispers grew stronger, carrying names across provinces like leaves on a silent wind, and her children answered with unwavering devotion. By the time the Empire began to notice, it was already too late. The Crimson Expansion was not a war to be fought, but a story already written in midnight ink. Kings and emperors could command armies, but armies cannot march against a whisper. And so the Dark Brotherhood's reach became as natural as moonrise, a tide of quiet certainty that no mortal power could halt. As the Dark Brotherhood's shadow lengthened, Tamriel awoke to a quiet reckoning. Empires rose and fell, but the family beneath the earth moved with a patience that empires could never match. Where soldiers clashed in noisy campaigns, the Brotherhood changed the fate of realms with the stillness of a single breath. Historians speak of the Silencer of Sensual, an assassin whose name is lost, but whose act unmade a coastal war. A rival prince of Palatine planned to seize the harbor and claim the Moonsugar routes. One night, he simply did not rise from his cushions. No mark marred his body. Only a faint trace of nightshade perfume lingered in the air. The invasion crumbled before it began, and merchants whispered their gratitude to the unseen hand that had saved countless lives while shedding but one. In the north, the Snowfall Pact dissolved when a Skyrim Jarl was found seated upon his high chair, a black handprint pressed upon his brow like a second crown. Bards sing of frost trolls and ancient curses, yet those who listen more closely hear another tale, that a single speaker walked alone across the winter tundra, guided by the Night Mother's whisper, and left with no trace but silence. The Jarl's death shifted alliances, ending a feud that might have drowned the holds in blood for decades. The Brotherhood's influence became a currency of its own. Ambitious nobles traded in rumors of their favor, claiming secret ties even when none existed. Merchants financed contracts to clear trade routes of corrupt officials. Kings who publicly denounced the family privately weighed whether a quiet petition might serve their people better than any treaty. Fear became diplomacy. All became law. And yet, the family remained curiously humble within their sanctuaries. Speakers recorded no chronicles, carved no triumphs into stone. They believed their work belonged to the void, not to history. A contract completed was a breath released, nothing more. While rulers erected statues of themselves, the assassins vanished like dew at dawn, their greatest victories hidden in the folds of night. Inside the sanctuaries, however, the stories lived in murmured tradition. Young initiates listened wide-eyed as elders recounted these silent triumphs, not as boasts but as lessons. Patience over haste, precision over spectacle, devotion over glory. A single perfect strike, they taught, could spare thousands from war. To kill with care was to honor the mother's tender darkness. Still, with every success, the weight of suspicion thickened. Imperial magistrates launched secret inquiries. Mages of the Synod experimented with wards to block the Black Sacrament. But a whisper is harder to cage than wind. Assassins adapted, altering rituals, blending sigils with the ordinary symbols of village life. The more authorities searched, the deeper the Brotherhood sank into the folds of common shadow, becoming at once invisible and inevitable. In time, their Crimson Expansion was less a surge and more a truth of nature, like tide and eclipse. Tamriel's rulers came to accept that the Night Mother's children were part of the world's balance, an unseen court of final arbitration. When vengeance or desperate justice called, a single candle, a simple chant, and an offering of resolve could summon the void's own emissaries. Thus the Brotherhood's legend ripened. They were not conquerors in the usual sense, yet their influence surpassed that of many kings. Every quiet contract braided another strand into the great tapestry of Tamriel's fate, a pattern visible only to the Night Mother and her devoted listener. And while empires planned for seasons and decades, the Dark Brotherhood moved as eternity moves, silent, patient, unbound by time. The imperial city gleamed like a jeweled crown at the center of Tamriel, its white gold tower piercing the heavens like a frozen sunbeam. Merchants thronged the market district, senators debated beneath painted domes, and the river Niben carried the murmurs of 10,000 lives. Above the noise of commerce and ambition, the empire seemed eternal. Yet in the silent corridors beneath its marble halls, the Dark Brotherhood's shadow glided with patient grace. It began, as always, with a whisper. A weary magistrate, betrayed by a rival, performed the black sacrament behind shuttered windows, candlelight flickering across trembling hands. Somewhere far away, the listener felt the night mother's breath and recorded name. Soon a speaker walked among the spires of the capital disguised as an unremarkable pilgrim, eyes lowered, senses attuned to every echo. In the time it takes a blossom to open, a single life ended without cry or struggle. An entire faction within the Elder Council shifted like sand in a subtle breeze. The imperial court, outwardly grand, was a maze of intrigue, ambitions layered like lacquer upon ancient wood. Counselors plotted behind gold-framed tapestries. Generals weighed campaigns with hidden motives, and merchants gilded their fortunes with clandestine pacts. To the Brotherhood, it was fertile soil. A well-placed dagger or a carefully measured draft of poison could achieve what no army or treaty could: a sudden change of destiny. Yet the assassins moved not as brutes, but as artisans of the void. They studied every corridor of the palace, memorizing the rhythm of guard rotations, the soft clink of armor far below. They mapped secret tunnels older than the empire itself, passages built by forgotten emperors and left to silence. From these shadowed arteries they emerged like living thoughts, striking and vanishing before the city ever drew a startled breath. Rumors multiplied. Servants whispered of figures glimpsed at the edges of candlelight, a gloved hand on a doorframe, a flicker of crimson cloth dissolving into darkness. Senators found black feathers upon their desks, tokens neither threatening nor comforting, merely certain. Some laughed them away as childish pranks. Others ordered double guards at their chambers and slept with eyes half open, only to discover that fear does little to bar a door against the void. But the Brotherhood sought more than payment. Each imperial contract carried the weight of a lesson. To them, every life balanced upon a delicate thread of fate. Their task was to pluck that thread at precisely the right moment, so the world's tapestry would not tear, but flow into a new and necessary pattern. They did not kill for cruelty's sake. They killed to guide the great empire along the night mother's unseen design. Within the sanctuaries, speakers spoke of these imperial ventures in tones of reverence. Young initiates listened as if hearing sacred scripture. How a single death in a marble chamber could prevent a decade of war. How a quiet blade could preserve thousands of lives. The empire might never know the lives spared by those invisible choices, but the Brotherhood counted such silent mercies among their highest offerings. The white gold tower stood unshaken, but beneath its stones the family of the void left marks no mason could erase. A senator's sudden heart failure, a commander's inexplicable disappearance, an heir's peaceful death in sleep. Each became another line in a hidden chronicle known only to the Night Mother and her devoted children. The city above bustled, unaware that its brightest triumphs and darkest tragedies were subtly steered by hands clothed in silence. Thus the imperial court, proud and radiant, became a stage for the Brotherhood's most delicate performances. The empire endured, but its destiny danced to the rhythm of whispers and soft footfalls, to the soundless hymn of the Night Mother that only her chosen could hear. In the secret annals of the Brotherhood, the imperial city was never merely a destination. It was a proving ground where silence itself was tested against the clamor of empire. Within those marble walls and echoing halls unfolded a series of deeds so precise, so hushed, that even the most vigilant eyes could not catch the faintest flicker of their passage. One tale spoke of the evening of falling petals, when a celebrated diplomat from High Rock collapsed during a banquet held beneath the radiant chandeliers of the Elder Council. No wound marred her body, yet a single scarlet blossom lay upon her plate, its petals still trembling as if in a private breeze. Her death ended a trade dispute that threatened to ignite half of Iliac Bay, and merchants later toasted the unseen hand that had turned war into a quiet whisper of reconciliation. Another legend told of the vanishing of Lord Arturian, an imperial spymaster whose schemes wound through every province like a nest of hidden snakes. One night he was present at a clandestine council. By dawn, he was gone, leaving only a black feather on the polished floor and a window ajar to the moonlit sky. The Emperor's agents scoured Tamriel for years, chasing ghosts and rumors, while the Brotherhood simply folded the memory of the contract into silence, a prayer completed. The most daring of all was the Sleepless Throne, a young heir, restless and reckless, threatened to plunge the Empire into chaos through impulsive decrees. When negotiations failed, a quiet petition reached the Night Mother. An assassin slipped through layers of guard patrols, past wards of fire and ice, moving as a shadow moves in the mind. By dawn, the heir lay peaceful in bed, his face serene, as though he had simply drifted into an endless dream. The Emperor mourned publicly, yet those closest to the listener say the Night Mother herself breathed approval, a sigh like distant starlight. Each act changed the course of policy more profoundly than 100 speeches. The Elder Council learned to pause before reckless decisions, wondering whether a careless command might draw the attention of the Silent Family. In private, they called it the Hidden Veto, a force beyond law or steel that kept the Empire's ambitions tethered to caution. Despite such power, the Brotherhood sought no throne. Their satisfaction lay in service, not dominion. Contracts were fulfilled with the same devotion whether the target was a forgotten clerk or a prince whose name echoed across Tamriel. To the family of the Void, all lives balanced equally upon the Night Mother's unseen scales. Within the sanctuaries, initiates heard these accounts in reverent quiet. Speakers recounted every step not as triumph, but as teaching. Patience over haste, humility over pride, the certainty that the void needs no applause. They reminded their young that the greatest strike is the one that leaves the world apparently untouched, its new course hidden in the everyday turning of seasons. The imperial city continued to glitter beneath the sun, its bridges alive with merchants and pilgrims, its spires aglow at dusk. Citizens laughed, loved, and quarreled, unaware that their futures sometimes pivoted on a single, soundless heartbeat. Even as festivals filled the air with music, a deeper melody threaded through the night. The hush of secret footsteps, the soft breath of the void, the eternal hymn of the Night Mother. Thus the Empire's greatest stage became the Brotherhood's quiet masterpiece. No statue bears their likeness. No scroll records their names. Yet their influence lingers like a scent after rain, unseen, unforgettable, a presence felt in the pause before each imperial decree. In the heart of Tamriel, the family of shadows proved that silence can be the loudest force of all. Beyond the marble heart of the Empire, Tamriel sprawls in wild diversity. Snow-crowned peaks of Skyrim, the golden canyons of Hammerfell, the mist-veiled marshes of Black Marsh. Here, far from the measured bells of the imperial city, the Dark Brotherhood's influence flowed like hidden rivers, quiet yet unstoppable, threading itself into every province as if the void itself sought veins through which to breathe. The Night Mother's whispers did not respect borders. They drifted on salt winds across the Abyssinian Sea, rode the desert heat of Elsewhere, and slid through the cold stars over solitude. Everywhere, hearts heavy with loss or ambition performed the Black Sacrament. A mother kneeling beside a desert well, a pirate captain in the lantern glow of a swaying deck, a Dunmare widow beneath the red sky of Morrowind. Each plea rose like incense to an unseen sky, and somewhere a listener inclined an ear. Sanctuaries bloomed in secrecy like night-opening flowers. Beneath the volcanic plains of Vardenfell, a cavern of glassy stone held silent pools that mirrored moon and flame. In Valenwood, a hollowed grotto concealed chambers scented with living sap, where assassins trained to move as gracefully as falling leaves. A frozen cavern in Skyrim became a cathedral of blue ice where candles never melted, their flames steady in the still air. Every site reflected the land around it, yet each pulsed with the same soft heartbeat of the void. Contracts mirrored the character of each province. In Hammerfell, where honor duels and swift blades ruled, the Brotherhood wove itself into feuding clans, ending vendettas with a single, unseen stroke. In Argonia's endless swamps, where villages drifted on rafts of reeds, assassins became shadows among the reeds and fog, striking with the suddenness of marsh lightning. The Caitiate of Elsewhere, lovers of story and moonlit intrigue, whispered respectful tales of assassins who left behind only paw prints in the sand and a trace of moonsugar scent. Despite these far-flung expansions, the family remained one. Messengers traveled in silence along hidden roads, carrying coded notes woven into ordinary songs or sewn inside the lining of a traveler's cloak. A single gesture, a black feather brushed across a palm, a finger laid to the lips, could identify a brother or sister to those attuned. Distance meant little when the Night Mother's call was the true thread binding them. Her voice reached every corner like the slow tide beneath stars. Local rulers tried in vain to resist. Argonian marsh wardens set traps of swamp magic. Redguard captains doubled their night patrols. Bosmary hunters watched the forest with keen eyes. Yet a contract fulfilled always left them bewildered, for the Brotherhood moved not as soldiers, but as a dream passing through the waking world. No law can arrest a dream. No blade can duel a shadow. To those within the family, these far provinces were more than targets. They were hymns of the Mother's reach. Each new sanctuary, each successful contract, was a verse in the endless song of silence. Around flickering candles, they told stories of distant brethren, of a listener meditating beneath the moons of Elsewhere, of a speaker crossing the sea of ghosts in winter ice, of a novice in Valenwood who learned to breathe with the forest until even the trees forgot her presence. Thus the Brotherhood's veins spread outward, carrying the quiet certainty of the void into every land. No province could claim immunity. No culture could close its doors against a whisper. The Night Mother's children had become a secret element of Tamriel itself. Like gravity, unseen yet inescapable, a pull that shaped fates while remaining forever silent. The Brotherhood's reach into distant provinces gave rise to stories so strange and delicate that even bards dared sing them only in low tones. These were not battles, but whispered brushstrokes upon the canvas of Tamriel, each contract a quiet note in the endless music of the void. Among the dunes of Elsewhere, merchants still speak of the moonless caravan. A corrupt trade prince ruled the sugar routes with cruelty and fire, taxing caravans until villages starved. One night his campfire went dark. Guards found no struggle, only a pattern of paw prints leading to the horizon, as if the sands themselves had spirited him away. The next moonrise revealed a single black feather tucked into the folds of his silken robe. Trade resumed in harmony, and the Caitiate told the tale with respectful awe, never doubting that the Night Mother herself had padded across the desert on silent paws. Far to the north, in the icy embrace of Skyrim, the Huthfire's silence chilled even hardened warriors. A Jarl obsessed with conquest plotted a winter raid that would drown rival holds in blood. But during the long night of Huthfire, he simply did not wake. A candle at his bedside burned steady until dawn, its flame untouched by the drafts that haunted the old stone keep. No wound, no poison, only peace, and a kingdom spared from needless war. In the deep swamps of Black Marsh, Argonian elders recount the legend of the Mistveil Bride. An imperial governor sought to drain a sacred marsh to feed his empire's hunger for land. When local pleas failed, a desperate priest performed the black sacrament amid coiling fog. One morning the governor's barge drifted ashore, crew asleep in perfect stillness, their leader gone. Only the water lilies swayed, fragrant and unbroken, as if they had witnessed nothing at all. These tales carried more than fear. They spoke of balance. The Brotherhood did not strike for greed or spectacle, but for a subtle equilibrium understood only by the Night Mother. Every contract, whether born of vengeance or of desperate hope, became a quiet act of correction. A single thread pulled so the larger tapestry might remain whole. Sanctuaries across these lands absorbed the character of their surroundings while sharing one breath of purpose. The Valenwood refuge hummed with insect song and the resinous scent of living trees. In Hammerfell, sandstone halls glowed with heat and the soft clink of curved blades. Each site was different, yet each vibrated with the same low heartbeat, a rhythm that every assassin carried within. Distance dissolved when the listener's dream carried a name. The Night Mother's voice stitched provinces together like stars across a night sky. Messengers traveled between these sanctuaries along secret trails known as the Quiet Roads. They moved alone, often disguised as wandering minstrels or humble traders, bearing nothing but a melody or a proverb that concealed instructions within its cadence. To the untrained ear, these were simple travelers' songs. To the Brotherhood, each note was a lantern in the dark, guiding them to new contracts or distant kin. Local rulers learned to respect the invisible presence. A single black feather left on a palace step could still a rebellion before it began. A whispered rumor of the Night Mother's attention cooled tempers more effectively than a battalion of soldiers. The family of the Void had become an unseen diplomat, a silent judge whose verdict arrived without trial. And so the Brotherhood's veins of shadow pulsed through Tamriel's farthest reaches, carrying with them not terror alone, but a strange, solemn comfort. For those who sought justice beyond the grasp of law, the quiet promise remained. Light a candle, shape the effigy, speak the sacred plea, and the Void would answer, soft as nightfall, sure as the turning of the moons. For centuries the Dark Brotherhood moved as one body, each member a patient heartbeat in the great silence of the Void. But even the deepest shadow can fracture when touched by time. Whispers began to coil within the sanctuaries, quiet doubts, soft as drifting ash, that no candlelight could fully banish. At first the unrest seemed like the faint rustle of leaves. A speaker questioned whether a recent contract honored the Night Mother's balance. A listener delayed a decision, troubled by dreams that felt less like guidance and more like distant thunder. Such hesitations were rare in the family, and their presence lingered like a subtle chill. Still, blades were sharpened, contracts fulfilled, and the outward rhythm of devotion continued. But beneath the rituals lay subtle strains. Some assassins, hardened by years of silent service, wondered if the Void truly required such endless blood. Others feared the growing power of certain speakers whose ambitions stretched beyond the sanctuary's walls. It was said that in Valenwood, a pair of siblings debated for 3 nights beneath the whispering trees, their words slow as falling dew, about whether the Night Mother's voice belonged to all or only to a chosen few. The 5 tenets, once unbreakable as moonstone, began to feel like gentle guidelines rather than sacred law. A lone assassin in Hammerfell fulfilled a contract without proper sanction, claiming the Night Mother had spoken directly to her in the language of desert wind. In Skyrim, a listener quietly ignored a petition, believing mercy the truer path. Small transgressions, yet each left a hairline crack in the once flawless vessel of obedience. The Black Hand sought to mend these fissures with soft discipline. Councils were convened in candlelit caverns. Speakers spoke of unity and the eternal embrace of the Mother. Their voices were calm, but beneath the calm lay the tremor of recognition. A family cannot live in shadow forever without carrying pieces of the sun in secret. The Void remained eternal, yet mortals must still wrestle with mortal hearts. Outside forces sensed the shifting current. Imperial agents, long frustrated by the Brotherhood's elusiveness, began to prod at the edges of rumor, offering gold for whispers of dissent. Some contracts mysteriously failed, not through discovery, but through hesitation. A door left unopened. A blade held a heartbeat too long. Rivals such as the Morag Tong watched with quiet interest, like wolves noting a weakening stag. Within the sanctuaries, the old warmth cooled to a cautious chill. Shared meals were still taken, but laughter fell more softly, and glances lingered with unspoken questions. Was the Night Mother's will truly singular? Could her voice be claimed by one listener alone? Could the family serve both devotion and conscience without tearing itself apart? Yet even amid these doubts, love for the void endured. Many members found comfort in the slow rhythm of their work, in the belief that death, delivered with care, remained a necessary balance. They reminded one another that silence is not absence, but presence, that even cracks in stone can become patterns of unexpected beauty. So the Brotherhood moved into an era of subtle fracture, a time when every footstep echoed a little louder and every whisper carried the weight of choice. The Night Mother's song still drifted through dream and shadow, but now it mingled with the quiet music of human uncertainty, a counter-melody that neither devotion nor discipline could wholly erase. The cracks that first shimmered like hair-fine lines soon deepened into fault. What began as murmured questions beneath flickering candles became entire nights of silent contemplation, each assassin alone with the echo of the Night Mother's voice and the louder echo of their own heart. In the cavern sanctuary of Skyrim, a listener awoke from a vision drenched in moonlight and dread. The Mother's words, once as clear as still water, now arrived fractured, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Were these true whispers or the trick of a weary mind? She did not speak of it, but others noticed her hesitation when new contracts arrived, her pause before the ceremonial phrase, "We serve in the void's embrace." Far south, in the sweltering halls of Elsewhere, a speaker known for unerring precision began to improvise, bending the 5 tenets to fit personal judgment. He argued that the tenets were symbols, not iron chains, and that the void would honor intent more than form. Some nodded in wary agreement. Others clenched their blades in silent alarm. The sacred law, once unyielding as a mountain's root, now felt like sand shifting underfoot. These private storms rarely flared into open conflict, yet the air inside the sanctuaries thickened with unspoken tension. Shared meals grew quieter. Eyes lingered too long on the curve of a dagger or the shadow of a hallway. Old jokes about poison and silence now landed heavy, like stones dropped into deep water. Into this fragile quiet slipped outside hands. Imperial envoys whispered of pardons, gold, and secret alliances. Rival guilds, clever agents of the Morag Tong, and nimble thieves of the Black Blood clan, sought to turn dissent into advantage. They planted rumors like seeds. That one listener claimed the Mother's favor for personal power, that another plotted to betray the hand to the Empire. Truth mattered less than the gentle pressure of suspicion. Some sanctuaries answered by drawing inward. The Valenwood Refuge sealed its doors for a full season, allowing only the forest's natural hum to feed them. Others, like the hidden cave beneath Vardenfell's ash, tightened rituals until every breath was counted and every footstep measured. But discipline cannot mend a wound of spirit. It can only cover it like moss covers a broken stone. Among the rank and file, a subtler transformation unfolded. A novice once eager for the sharp dance of assassination began to spend long hours tracing constellations, searching for patterns beyond blood. An elder assassin carried a black feather not as a sign of death, but as a reminder of life's fragility. They wondered, quietly, carefully, if the void's true lesson was not the taking of breath, but the recognition of its fleeting grace. Yet through all disquiet the Brotherhood endured. Contracts were still fulfilled with the same soundless precision. Victims still fell as if swallowed by the night. And in rare, profound moments, the Night Mother's presence returned with startling clarity. A single phrase whispered in a dream, a candle that would not gutter though the wind howled like a beast. These flashes of certainty kept the faithful steady, convincing them that fracture was but another pattern in the eternal tapestry. The family had not shattered, not yet, but the silence between heartbeats had lengthened, and every assassin felt it. The void was vast, infinite, patient. Whether the Brotherhood would remain a single vessel or splinter into many, only the endless dark knew, and the dark does not hurry to answer. Before the sun rose on a new age of Tamriel, the Dark Brotherhood entered a twilight of its own making. The silent fractures of the past years deepened until the sanctuaries themselves seemed to breathe a wary air, each stone aware of the tension it held. And from that silence, a crimson dawn began to seep, first as rumor, then as blood. It began with a contract in Cyrodiil that should have been unremarkable, a corrupt magistrate, a desperate patron, a whispered plea to the Night Mother. But the strike went awry. The assassin's blade met not only the magistrate, but an innocent child who startled awake in the dark chamber. The tragedy spread through the provinces like a chill wind. Merchants whispered that the void had lost its precision, that the mother's children no longer heard her clear voice. Even seasoned speakers felt a tremor of doubt ripple through their nightly meditations. In the imperial city, the Black Hand convened beneath the echoing catacombs to debate the breach. Voices once unified now rang with discord. Some demanded swift punishment and stricter rights. Others warned that fear would break what trust remained. The candles guttered as if reluctant to witness their quarrel, and for the first time in generations, the listener's final word failed to quiet the room. Outside these hidden halls, the world took notice. Legions of the Empire, long frustrated by the Brotherhood's unseen knives, sensed vulnerability. The Morag Tong whispered of opportunity, their agents moving like serpents to reclaim contracts once ceded to their Western cousins. Even common folk, once fearful and awed, began to speak more boldly, their prayers to the Night Mother fewer, their eyes sharper when strangers passed by night. Sanctuaries that had thrived in secrecy now faced relentless pressure. In Skyrim, a refuge carved into blue ice was betrayed by a frightened novice who sought imperial pardon. Soldiers descended like winter wolves, their torches staining the cavern walls with orange fire. In Hammerfell, a desert hideout found its secret entrance revealed by a shifting dune, and dawnlight fell upon the assassins before they could scatter into shadow. The Brotherhood answered with silence and with blood. Contracts grew harsher, as if to reassert the old terror. Yet each violent success felt less like devotion and more like desperation. Speakers sent ravens bearing urgent missives to distant sanctuaries, but too often the birds returned to empty roosts, their eyes reflecting only the cold moon. Among the faithful, dreams turned restless. Where once the Night Mother's lullaby soothed like still water, now her voice came fragmented, sharp as broken glass. Some feared that the void itself questioned their worth. Others clung to the belief that this was a trial, a necessary darkness before renewal. They sharpened their blades and hearts alike, praying that the crimson light of this false dawn would fade. Yet dawn, once begun, cannot be undone. The crimson hue on the horizon widened each day, not of sunlight, but of consequence. The family that had danced for centuries between breath and silence now felt the weight of time pressing in, as if the void watched with patient, unreadable eyes. The Black Hand could feel the inevitable approaching like the slow tide, a reckoning written not in prophecy, but in the quiet arithmetic of choice and consequence. Through all of Tamriel, a single truth whispered through marketplaces and mountain passes alike. The Dark Brotherhood still lived, but it was no longer unbreakable. And in that recognition, feared by some, welcomed by others, the Crimson Dawn continued to rise. The red horizon that had first appeared as rumors soon deepened into a storm of certainty. What once was a family moving in perfect, silent accord now felt like a constellation losing its shape, stars sliding slowly from their ancient patterns. Every sanctuary sensed the shift, a hush before an unseen tide. In the marble depths beneath the imperial city, the Black Hand gathered once more. The chamber smelled of wax and cold stone, their shadows stretched across the curved walls like patient predators. A speaker, voice low as a midnight bell, warned that the sanctuaries were falling one by one, not to open war, but to betrayal and exhaustion. Another answered that the void would cull the unfaithful and leave only the pure. Their words met in air thick with the weight of consequence, and the candles trembled as though listening. Far to the east, in Morrowind's ashen glow, a listener dreamed of the Night Mother walking a path of broken glass. Each footstep rang like distant thunder, but no words followed. When she awoke, her pillow was wet with tears she could not name. She wrote the dream in the old ink of soot and salt, sending it by hidden courier to every sanctuary. Some read it as warning, others as invitation to return to deeper devotion, but none could deny the cold unease it carried. Imperial patrols pressed harder. Where once the Brotherhood flowed unseen, new checkpoints and informants sprouted like iron weeds. A single careless footprint in Skyrim's snow drew soldiers who combed the mountain caves for weeks. In Elsewhere, caravans were halted at dusk, their travelers questioned for the faint scent of nightshade or the soft black feathers that sometimes clung to robes. Fear no longer worked only in the Brotherhood's favor. It now served the Empire as well. Within the family, mistrust became an unspoken companion. Daggers were sharpened, not just for contracts, but for the possibility of betrayal. Speakers kept secret lists of names they once called siblings, weighing loyalty against survival. Whispers traveled faster than messages, shaping shadows into accusations. A smile lingered a heartbeat too long and became evidence. A delayed response to a summons became a silent trial. Yet amid this tightening net, the Brotherhood continued to breathe. Contracts were fulfilled with an artistry born of both desperation and devotion. An enemy general vanished from a fortified keep as though the night itself had opened a hidden door. A corrupt guildmaster was found lifeless in a locked chamber perfumed with lavender, a single black feather resting on his brow. Each success was both triumph and elegy, proof that the Void's art still lived even as the family frayed. Some members found unexpected solace in these dark days. The constant nearness of loss sharpened their awareness of each moment. The flicker of a candle, the hush before dawn, the soft sound of a companion's measured breath. They began to speak of the void not only as an end, but as a mirror reflecting the fragile beauty of life. Even in chaos, they felt the Night Mother's presence, not as command, but as quiet witness. By the season's close, the Crimson Dawn had become more than a metaphor. It glowed on every horizon of Tamriel, in the scarlet haze of Morrowind's skies, in the copper deserts of Hammerfell at dusk, in the blood-tinged ice of Skyrim's endless winter. The Brotherhood stood poised between survival and dissolution, between faith and the slow pull of mortal doubt. And still the Void waited, patient and absolute. From the language of endless night, endings are merely transformations, and every Crimson Dawn is but a prelude to deeper dark. The Crimson Dawn bled into night, and the Dark Brotherhood stood upon the thin edge between memory and myth. Across Tamriel, the sanctuaries lay quiet, some abandoned to moss and dust, others hidden behind doors that opened only to a trusted knock. Where once the family shadow stretched wide and certain, now it rested like a single breath upon the world, fragile yet enduring. Within the black stone chamber of a forgotten Sardaelic crypt, the remaining speakers gathered. The air smelled of damp earth and old candle wax, a scent as ancient as their creed. They spoke not of conquest or fear, but of survival. Not the survival of blades and contracts, but of meaning. What is a family when its numbers fade? What is a vow when the world forgets the words? The listener, eyes closed, listened for the mother's voice. For long hours, only the silence of the tomb replied. Then, as the final candle guttered, a whisper touched her thoughts like the brush of a raven's wing. No command, no prophecy, only a presence as soft as the still air between heartbeats. She bowed her head, understanding that the void required no grand decree. Its truth lived in every quiet act of devotion, every unseen moment of balance. Messages went out in the old, careful ways, a black feather sewn beneath a traveler's hem, a tune hummed by a passing minstrel, a single phrase etched inside a wooden charm. Not a call to arms, but a reminder. The Brotherhood endures not by numbers, but by silence, by patience, by the acceptance of change. The sanctuaries would not rise again in the splendor of old. They would become something smaller, more hidden, yet perhaps more faithful. Scattered across the provinces, surviving assassins receive the message like a gentle snowfall. In Skyrim, a lone blade-bearer extinguished her final candle and closed the ice-blue doors of her refuge, bowing to the endless night sky. In Valenwood, a shadow among the trees whispered a farewell to the forest and vanished along a moss-covered path. In Morrowind, beneath a sky the color of dying embers, a weary killer laid his dagger beside a pool of still water and watched the ripples fade. They did not mourn. They understood that the void is eternal, and that their service was never meant to be measured by walls or numbers. Death is but a door. Silence is but a song without end. To dissolve into legend is not to disappear, but to return to the source from which all shadows flow. Outside, the world moved on. Merchants traded, children laughed, empires schemed, unaware that an ancient vow passed quietly into memory. Yet in lonely rooms and starlit forests, those who once knelt in the mother's name felt a familiar stillness, a presence neither gone nor graspable, like the hush between the setting of the moons and the first cry of dawn. And so the Brotherhood's last oath was not a spoken promise, but a collective breath, a gentle yielding to the endless dark, a recognition that the void does not end when voices fall silent. It is the silence itself, patient and whole, the space where every story begins and ends. Night settles across Tamriel like a velvet tide, and the last echoes of the Dark Brotherhood drift into dream. No horns mark their passing, no monuments rise. Only the hush of leaves in Valenwood, the slow sigh of Skyrim's wind, the salt-sweet murmur of Somerset's shore. Each sound carries a memory, and in that memory the family endures. Somewhere, an old sanctuary breathes beneath its shroud of earth. Candles have long since burned to pools of wax, yet the stone walls remember each whisper, each footfall, each promise made in reverent silence. Dust gathers like soft snow upon the altar where once a black handprint shone. The void does not weep, it simply holds. Those who once bore the mark of the Black Hand have scattered into quiet lives. A former speaker tends a garden of night-blooming flowers, each petal releasing a fragrance that recalls moonlit hunts. A retired assassin teaches children the art of patient breath, never speaking of blades, but carrying their balance in every movement. They do not forget, yet they do not cling. The void lives in the pause between heartbeat and sigh, and they dwell comfortably in that space. Legends will ripple outward like circles on a midnight lake. Travelers will share fireside tales of an order that killed with the gentleness of a falling feather. Some stories will grow extravagant, phantoms that ride shadows, daggers that drink moonlight. Others will capture a deeper truth, that the Brotherhood was less a guild of murder than a meditation on inevitability, a living poem about the thin line between beginning and end. Even those who never knew the Night Mother may feel her presence when dusk is deep and the stars burn clear. She is in the silence after a final farewell, in the calm that follows a storm, in the soft darkness that invites rest. Her voice is not command but comfort, a reminder that every life returns to the great stillness, and that this return is neither punishment nor loss. The last oath of the Dark Brotherhood was never spoken aloud. It was a surrender to that stillness, a vow to become the quiet itself. In this way, they have not died. They have simply become indistinguishable from the night they served. So breathe, traveler. Let the roads of Tamriel fade behind your closing eyes. Hear the distant lull of the Abyssinian Sea, the sigh of the Jarrell Mountains, the deep heartbeat of Nirn beneath the soil. These sounds are the Mother's eternal hymn. They welcome you into the same gentle dark that cradled her children, a darkness without fear, without end. Sleep now in that quiet, where every story finds its echo and every echo returns to silence. For in the endless void, there is no farewell, only the soft, patient rhythm of forever.